Hey guys, thank you so much for checking this out. We are the Interim Expert Team, and today we have Eric here with us. Eric is currently a venture partner at S3 Ventures, where he invests in technology startups targeting business, healthcare, and digital consumer experiences. Eric, I'll let you just have the floor.
Hi, Parker. Thanks for having me and the rest of the team. Great to be here. Yeah, happy to introduce myself. I'm Eric Engineer, like Parker said. I'm at S3 Ventures. We're the largest venture capital firm focused on Texas-based entrepreneurs. Been around about 14 years, made 40-something investments. We do early stage investing, so like seed, Series A, Series B type things. Prior to joining S3, I was CEO at one of the portfolio companies of the fund, a company called Invodo, where we were pioneering the use of product video from large retailers. So we had big companies like Home Depot, Toys R Us, JCPenney, Verizon, Vera Bradley, all these different kinds of brands working with us to produce hundreds or in some cases thousands of product videos every year. And we were really kind of pioneers in the space. You know, we take it for granted today that video is on every product page, but that wasn't the case 10 years ago. And we kind of, you know, those horrible white background videos, we kind of created those that concept a long time ago. But things have obviously evolved since then, and things look a lot better. But that's where things started.
Well, yeah, as you mentioned, we at one point had the white background, and now we have virtual backgrounds, so it's almost
exactly, as you can see here. And obviously you can create high quality content today so much better than you could, and so much cheaper than you could 10 years ago. So it's been awesome to see how things progress.
Oh, technology and the pivoting. Yes. So the world around us is obviously not the same world that we would have had in, say, 2019. And for lack of better words, I'm just going to say the situation. COVID, pandemic, BLM, all the things in which our world is occupying. What are ways that you have seen yourself pivoting as a result of the situation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was pretty impactful, as it has been for everyone, you know, in all facets of life. I'd say as a venture capital firm, as an investor, you know, those first 2 months or so, we kind of really looked inward and focused on our portfolio companies. You know, each and every one had a different kind of situation that they had to manage through. I would say in a large number of cases, it meant, you know, really rethinking the revenue plan and the expenses, and that often meant layoffs or furloughs, and so we did a fair bit of that. There was also the Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP program, some folks may be familiar with, where it was a mess, right? It was really hard to figure out what the rules were and how do you apply, and for VC-backed companies, it wasn't always clear either. So we had to work with lawyers and other folks to help the companies navigate that. So, you know, all of that complexity was pretty challenging in those first couple months. But then by the middle of the summer, we started to get back to normal. We started to meet with entrepreneurs, primarily through Zoom and things like that. But believe it or not, you know, we got to the point where we were able to not meet a person face to face, but still make investments in their company, which is amazing. And we've done at least one, but we'll probably do another 2 or 3 in the next month or so. That'll be announced deals. So, you know, things are starting to kind of get back to normal, I guess. And that way, at least we're doing deals. And some of our portfolio companies have actually excelled in this environment too. We have a handful that, you know, technology adoption got accelerated from all of this, and they're actually doing 2 or 3x what they planned to do back in January. So you know, things are, you know, it's kind of two worlds. Some people are really hurting, and then others are just killing it. So
no, totally. Amazing. Yeah, we're all experiencing it very differently. Exactly as you said.
Yes, it is, for sure.
When was it for you, if you remember, almost like a pinpoint time when it did feel like it shifted and became more normal for you? Because you mentioned that people reinvesting again. Do you remember when that moment was?
Yeah, I think it was around June. Okay. You know, so like, you know, we were all kind of holding our breath. Like, what are the April and May numbers going to look like? You know, as the revenue levels came in, what's the floor or the new normal? You know, for companies. And it started to stabilize, I felt, by June. And, you know, a lot of the companies that I was talking to at that time, you know, we kind of mutually agreed, let's just put a pause on the investment discussions. You don't know what the rest of your year is going to look like. So, you know, I don't know what I'm going to be investing in. So let's just, you know, kind of take a break and come back. And so some of those conversations got reignited once they figured out, you know, what things, you know, they felt comfortable kind of signing up for in terms of
like when the floor didn't feel like lava and it started to feel a little bit
more. I mean, who knows? I mean, we don't know what the fall holds for any of us. And so there's still that kind of cloud hanging over things. But you know, the companies that have shown that they can kind of still move the ball forward, even in a tough environment, even if it's not the same plan they had before, they still could be great investments because, we're very much long-term investors. Venture capital, you're investing for many years. And in fact, our firm is set up pretty uniquely where we have a single multi-billionaire family that backs our entire fund. That's been the case for 14 years. So, one of our, in our tagline, it's like patient capital is one of the key pillars for us. And that's really important. We're not really thinking about, just about, what 6 months or 9 months. We're really thinking about what's going to happen over 6 years or 9 years, in terms of big trends. And that's what we're investing in.
Yeah.
And so, we kind of also have to balance our decisions with that kind of mindset.
Well, and to the point you're making about, trying to project out what the trends are going to be. And you did mention tech, and some things are rapidly accelerating and performing better than they would have expected in January. What are some other trends or things that you think are going to start emerging, or things that already have emerged?
Well, yeah, in the technology world, it's very clear that, generally just the broader adoption of digital in the enterprise, whether it's for productivity or interacting with customers, whether it's supporting customers, selling with customers, all of those things are very much getting accelerated. In fact, we had a company get bought by DocuSign, a company called Live Oak Technology, in the middle of the summer, or late summer, because of that basically trend. They were already partnering, but that really, I think, helped kind of push things forward where, they helped really large banks and other financial institutions interact with their customers and do things that would normally require, pen and paper or fax or face-to-face to sign off on things. They could do it all in a kind of a Zoom plus DocuSign type environment. And so those types of things where things that were offline can be kind of fully digitized and done remotely, are doing super well. And then also, I think it is also accelerating what we were already seeing in just adoption of just broadly just software, cloud-based software in certain verticals or industries that were slow to adopt it. So if you think not just healthcare, which is obvious, but financial services, things like construction, property, tech, there's a lot of these kind of verticals that in that first wave of cloud, because they're regulated or they're just tend to be slower adopters, or because the mobile devices weren't there, so they have a lot of people that are not in front of a desk all day, but they're out in the field. And because mobile now is become so much more mature and lower cost to deploy, you're seeing all of these other industries where like there's other parts of the economy that didn't really embrace digital are embracing it now. And so I'm super excited about all of those types of areas. And that's where I tend to spend a lot of time. On the consumer side, it's still difficult. It kind of feels like that whole wave of mobile and social kind of came and went, and what's next there. I mean, there's still great social things happening, obviously, like TikTok and amazing phenomenon, but it's not as, kind of clear what's next. And I think the investing there is slowed down relative to enterprise. And you can see that in the IPO market too. Like all the IPOs are pretty much enterprise IPOs.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Unity and Snow and Yeah,
and JFrog, I think today also, or yesterday too. Yeah, so yeah.
So Eric, I have to ask, do you feel like, again, I guess we're going with the situation at the start of this all, so kind of, late February, early March, from there on, do you feel like there's any piece of knowledge that you really could have utilized, or some sort of, I guess, kind of tool in your toolkit that you would have loved to have that you did not have to kind of work through all of this?
I think as an investor, you mean?
Yes. Yeah.
I think, we weren't, kind of big embracers of like things like Zoom. We were definitely, it's a relationship business, and it's about building trust, right? It's like very much like dating, right? You're trying to get to know the entrepreneur and develop trust in both directions over the course of weeks or even months in some cases. And so because of that, we'd always kind of, been biased towards face-to-face interactions and really encouraged it, and would actually question when people who were local, or even if they were in Dallas and Houston, if they didn't make the trek to meet us in Austin, you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? And so, it's like, it's kind of like in sales, so, you have that mindset if you want to kind of, press the flesh a little bit. And so, And, that whether there's coffees or even like in later stages of investing, like when we're kind of just about to maybe get closer to extending term sheets, we'd go out for dinners and with the founders or the senior team and get to know each other. And we would always do these like half day or full day, what we call diligence days, where we'd go to the office, our team would go to their office and get a sense of the environment. So there were all these things that were kind of built into our way of doing things that had to completely stop and we had to reinvent. I'd say that, I think I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to adjust, and I think we all were forced to adjust really fast. And, it's fine. We've been able to kind of get over that, and we haven't let it slow us down. So, I don't think, just being in the technology space, it wasn't like this big leap for us to do that. But generally, it was definitely a mindset shift. Mm-hmm. But I think we've been able to do it just fine.
Do you think you'll retain a lot of these same practices when the world, air quote, normalizes?
It's a great question. I think we'll definitely be defaulting to video rather than a phone call. I mean, it's amazing to me that we would do so many just kind of, conference calls. I don't even use that term. It seems, all the time is a default, even for a first meeting, which doesn't make sense. So in some ways, it actually has accelerated that intimacy on those first meetings, which is really nice. But it does still not it doesn't make up for a lot of things. Like you don't get to see like how teammates interact with each other in a room. Because, the Zoom interaction is just different. It's a little bit more, everyone takes their time, or kind of their cue and when to speak. And so that isn't completely clear. So I think we will definitely, hopefully go back to some of that kind of face-to-face trust building stuff, but earlier in the process, yes, I think we'll use things like video more. We will also probably, I suspect, even though this is not like officially kind of part of our strategy or anything, I suspect we'll be a little bit more open to deals outside of Texas than we've traditionally been. We've kind of always focused on Texas, but definitely have done deals and always meet with entrepreneurs in the middle of the country, especially for later stage deals where there's less kind of rolling up our sleeves required. But I think that mindset could change for us, I suspect.
Yeah.
And also, I would say also for our bias around remote teams in our portfolio. I think that's, that will change too. We already have a couple portfolio companies that have not re-signed their leases and are just kind of indefinitely going to be kind of distributed teams. And that's starting to open up conversations around, oh, well, maybe we'll hire an exec that's not in Austin, that, which I think would have been almost heresy in some cases, and so it's just, and I know other companies and other people have kind of already been there, but we as a firm and, even myself personally, I hadn't made that shift. Maybe I'm just slow relative to others, but so I think there's just that kind of maybe bias that's going to be loosened a little bit.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah.
Interesting.
Parker, I know you had more, sorry.
Sorry, do you mind if I hop in real quick, Parker?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just while you're talking about remote teams, do you think that are you advising your portfolio companies a little differently? Like, are you having them completely staff up now, or are you having them do a little bit more of remote and contract teams internally as they grow with this kind of environment?
We're not necessarily pushing contract versus full-time. That is should be really driven more by just kind of what's right for the role and the maybe the financial constraints. What we I think have all been kind of forced to do. I mean, I think every single company is still working remotely. There might be a few that have offices open where like certain subgroups go in for certain things. I think that it does happen. But we are still hiring and trying to hire according to our plans, and just hiring people remotely. I mean, in fact, even at S3, like our latest hire has never been in our office. We hired him in March, and just as this was kicking off, and so we had met him face to face, but he actually never got to come into the office. So we've kind of experienced it firsthand. Of like, what does it mean to onboard someone and feel comfortable? He's doing really well. So it's definitely doable. And there's certain maybe types of folks that might excel or be okay in that situation than others, and maybe certain types of jobs that lend themselves better to kind of remote onboarding. But yeah, we haven't really let that change our hiring plans for companies. We still want them to do the right thing and grow and take advantage of the opportunity ahead of them.
Yeah. So how do you see, I feel like you actually already answered this a little bit,
Mhm.
but do you kind of see the way that your industry has shifted because in light of COVID, do you feel like that would have happened anyways, eventually?
Yes, I think a lot of this stuff is just accelerating things.
Yeah.
These trends would have happened, maybe not to the full extremes that they are now, because I mean, I wouldn't say this is ideal either, right? I mean, I think there's probably some in between that's the right balance.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if you think about, like, that I know there are these virtual trade shows and other things that are happening, but most companies that I've talked to will say that those are not as effective, right? It's better than nothing, right? And they're good, and there may be even some positives or ways to kind of set up meetings and not have to rely on luck as much, in those shows. But that's gonna affect. I think people are gonna want to go back to some of that kind of stuff for sure. I do think maybe people won't kind of jump to traveling on
Right.
planes when they don't need to from an expense management standpoint. I think
Right.
they will realize that maybe certain video calls and things like that could be just as effective. In fact, we're finding people are still able to close deals the same way and stuff like that. And people's expectations on both sides, both the client side and all, are kind of now reset to where that's not an odd thing, or it doesn't kind of signal something that it shouldn't. So
Exactly. Like that, a single business trip for the one meeting to go halfway.
yeah, I did that all the time and spent thousands or even tens of thousands maybe dollars for one meeting, right? And kind of tried to justify it by adding other meetings around it. But at the end of the day, if some C-level person says they'll take a meeting, you're like, oh yeah, I was going to be in town anyway. Right? And
Exactly.
buy the
Thursday, I was going to
really
be
expensive
there.
plane
Right.
ticket, 48 hours before, and you get on the plane and go. And maybe that's still appropriate in certain situations. I don't know, but yeah, I mean,
It doesn't
we'll
hurt.
see.
Yeah.
It
I do
definitely,
miss restaurants.
Yeah.
definitely. And having an excuse to go out to restaurants, right?
Exactly.
You feel a little guilty.
Expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when do you feel like it's appropriate for companies to approach S3 Ventures?
Yeah, thank you. So, first of all, we do love to get to know and be helpful to entrepreneurs even a whole year before we would invest. I think, like I said earlier, it's about building trust and relationships and both directions. And, you don't want to kind of have a shotgun marriage, right? And so, I think to the extent to which we can meet folks in advance, we love to do that. But when we're actually making our first investment, like I said, we're seed A and B. And for us, seed, the term seed can mean a lot of things, but for us, it is when, at least for a business technology, it means you're generating revenue, at least from a handful of customers, and it's not just pilot revenue, it's actually they've deployed it, it's in production. And there's enough commonality between, maybe the 5 to 10 customers, depending on whether you're doing small business or enterprise. But there's enough commonality where I can kind of draw a line, right? Or a cluster, like I can put a circle around this cluster of data points and say, okay, this is all the same, right? You're delivering a similar value proposition to a similar kind of buyer. They all kind of pay the same price. There's, that product market fit that people will use, that this kind of evidence of that in some way. And, what happens, unfortunately, sometimes is I may meet a company that has like $500,000 in revenue. They say, oh, I'm $500,000. I'm ready to take venture money from you. I'm saying, well, it's all from one customer. So that really didn't teach me anything, right? Or, oh, it's all a pilot, it's this big pilot that has a bunch of professional services. It's really not your software being deployed, in a recurring way. Or it's maybe 5 or 10 customers, but they are all very different. They're all using different features or capabilities, different kinds of buyers. You haven't really learned that you could, even there's some semblance of repetition, happening in the market. So that's the key thing for me there. And, once we get to that point, then, we're happy to maybe participate in a seed round. We can lead it. We can write a check for a convertible note or a price round. We're very flexible at the seed stage. When you get to the A, that's when we write our $3 to $5 million checks. And that's where, usually the companies are closer to $1 million in recurring revenue. And that's where you not only have that product market fit very well established, but you're starting to understand what it means to be able to sell. And ideally, you've even hired 1 or 2 salespeople that can do it. And it's just not the founder, right? And then it's like, okay, how do we build out that team? How do we build out marketing to support those, all the leads and everything that you need to continue to do that. So that tends to be where we come in. We will also do B rounds, where we'll come in, we'll write a $10 million check into a business that has a few $1 million in revenue, but that's, those are rare, just given the marketplace.
Absolutely, that makes perfect sense. You mentioned sales being something that you prefer people have when they first start out or when they come to you. Are there any other resources that you feel like your portfolio companies should have, either when they come to you or as you start to invest in them? Are there is there a minimum requirement or minimum suggestions that you're making now that are different from before?
Than before?
And just in general, but.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, I mean, the most important thing is that you have a strong team, right? And so, and I don't expect that the full team to be built out, right, at the seed stage or anything like that. But the ability to recruit people and show that you can recruit quality people is one of the most important things as a founder in the early days, because, to me, that tells me everything. If in fact, we haven't announced it yet, but we've made, one investment that's probably one of the earliest investments we've made in a long time, but it was because the founder just was a repeat entrepreneur that had, that had real strong domain experience, but then also was able to bring other really experienced and domain experts, into the fold, and so that gave me all the confidence in the world to kind of lean forward. So, there are things like that can make a difference. And so if it's not on the team, it could be your product is just being adopted. One thing I would say is, especially for consumer, and some other models, even like some freemium business models, the revenue is important and that you can convert, but even if you just have really strong adoption, right? And I'm a product manager by background, I'm technical background in computer science and product management. And so I always have this bias also around, even if you haven't completely figured out the monetization, and if there's just really strong adoption and really strong usage and people love it, and whether there's word of mouth expansion or just really like people are using it every day and they get real high value out of it, I know you'll figure it out, and to me, so that it really comes down to that. And I also look for the opposite of that, which is kind of the head fake, which is, sales are going crazy. This is good. Look, I signed all these big names, and maybe you're just good at selling and telling a story. And then you go look at the product usage, and it's like, wow, they just spent $100,000 on 100 seats, and only 10 of them are being used, and they log in once a week or whatever it is, And so, those are the things that we kind of, as part of a diligence process, try to uncover, because you can also have these false positive signals as well.
Right. I love that one thing you touched on too is right now in the situation and the times that we're in, we're constantly fixated and focusing on how things are different versus what is still the same from the before times, which is relationships and trust. That has not changed and will not change. You still have to instill and foster that.
And you still have to create value as a company, right? In fact, I love the way you put that, Ashlyn, because that's the way I've been thinking about it, is like, this is just another market circumstance. I mean, we're kind of used to it in venture because we're investing in unproven markets all the time, right? Or where there's a lot of uncertainty. And so, COVID, clearly very unique situation, but at the same time, it's not very different than what, from a very narrow standpoint, an entrepreneur may face in his or her market, in terms of things changing on a dime, right? Like a Google suddenly getting into your space, or, we have companies face death multiple times before they're successful. And so that kind of familiarity or comfort level with those kind of existential threats is kind of par for the course almost for ventures. So, so in some ways, that it does kind of feel normal in the way we kind of, think of investing and kind of guiding companies.
Yeah, uncertainty is just part of the process.
Uncertainty is part of it. No, it's where the value gets created. I mean, that's why you get it's the risk return, part of venture.
Exactly. And it's interesting. You touched on a little bit of kind of the sales fake and quality people. I feel like there's a big glamorization around entrepreneurship, and everybody's learned to brand themselves better online. Everybody's been able to make things sound better, right? So how do you qualify qualified people?
Oh yeah, it's a very good question, kind of. I would say is just two things. One is just actually meeting them and spending more time with them, because yeah, like, what someone looks like on social or through PR or being on some list or something like that, definitely will probably still influence you, right? We all have subconscious or unconscious biases. And so I'm sure it does still have an impact, and maybe it's still positive and worth doing all those things for sure. But at the end of the day, yeah, I think it's meeting people and then talking to the people that they've worked with, both in a 360 way. I like to talk to not only peers and former managers, but I like to talk to people who had worked for the person and understand how they were as a manager and the hiring, like with the quality of people that they are able to hire and all of that other stuff. So I think that's fundamentally the way, is time together. And that's why I was getting about, it's a relationship thing, and you have to kind of meet people over an extended period of time to really understand it. And then still you're kind of taking a leap of faith. But it is very much kind of social signals. Like, who else is vouching for them? Who else has worked with them? We do a lot of reference checking. In this deal that I was just working on, I talked to probably 7 or 8 different people that had interacted with one of the co-founders, and so just to get a sense of that.
Awesome.
I think that's a great answer.
Anyone have any questions for Eric before we wrap?
I did. You've been incredibly thorough, so I have no further questions.
All right. Probably talking too much.
No, not even remotely. No.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Eric.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, if I can be helpful to any entrepreneurs out there, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just explain why you're reaching out. Happy to connect.
Absolutely. What kind of letter gets your attention?
Oh, well, yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, so yeah. I do have a pet peeve of where people just add me on LinkedIn and I have no idea why they're adding me. So that I do not respond to usually. But no, at the end of the day, it's just very clear, concise messaging. Like, to me, I'm a little bit of a Nazi also around communications. And I would say, like, written communication, and if you should be able to say everything probably in half the words that you initially wrote it down, right? So it's like almost like whatever I wrote, now can I shrink it down again, do that pass.
Okay,
but yeah, I think 2 or 3 sentences. You guys are in the world of marketing, this, right? And so to me, that's something actually I look for even in entrepreneurs and executives also, is how clearly they can communicate. Because at the end of the day, it really does come down to getting a bunch of people together, and communication is the way you do it.
Exactly. It's like succinct, articulate, but it's like, and get to the point.
Yeah, to the point, but still, not too dry either, right? The creative has to be part of it too, and passion and all that. Yeah, authentic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, all right. Yeah.
And we'll be in touch soon.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.